Welcome to Rabbi Pinto's podcast. Today, in this session, we'll focus on what it means to live a mindful and conscious life. Um, we will take a look at some of the tools Judaism provides to help us to live this conscious and mindfulness, and will help us to be more aware of the small details of our everyday lives. I'm reminded of a story of a little girl that comes home from school with a drawing that she made in class that day. She dances into the kitchen where her mother is preparing the meal. And this is such a classic scenario that could happen in anybody's house. I've seen it myself with my own children, where they come in and they have this great project, the drawing that they worked on, and they call out, "Mom, Dad, guess what?" And they wave this drawing or whatever project they've been working on in school, and then we never even look at them. Sometimes we're just busy with whatever we're doing, whether we're on the phone, whether we're cooking, and it might be that we have a good reason why we're not, you know, directly looking at the child that is so excited. And that good reason could be, tending to the pots. And then our children say again, guess what? And they're waving something in front of our face. And our response is, what? What do you need? And as we're doing still the things that we are occupied with, our child tells us, "Mom, Dad, you're not looking, you're not listening." And then we turn to them and we say, "Sweetie, I am." And the response comes, "Mom, Dad, you're not listening with your eyes." I found that's uh, a very pertinent story, or something that it's not even a story. It's reality that our children come to us, or other people that comes to us, and we're not giving them our full attention, and that's perhaps an example of what's not being mindful and conscious to our surrounding. Um, Now, I've said at the beginning of this session that we will look for some tools in Judaism that will provide us to be more aware of the small details, like the story that we just read, that we just heard, and and let's look at the day to day and find some examples, even of our when we wake up in the morning, when we are reciting blessings. So, one Jewish approach to living conscience and being mindful is prayer, tefillah. Jewish literacy includes prayers that express gratitude, thanks, and praise. We find in the Jewish prayers an expression of the hopes and dreams of the collective Jewish people, as well as the personal requests and desires of individuals. Right. So when we go through the prayer, where there's it's an expression of our dreams, of what we want and what we kind of hope that God will grant us. Prayer has the potential, says Judaism, to allow us to deeply see our lives. It can help us identify our blessing as well as our work. Uh, Prayers and blessing focus our attention on the present. And this is something that we see through the whole blessings. And I'll give a few examples in a minute uh, of the blessings that we recite when we wake up in the morning. Although it is human nature to be aware of the things we want and or lack, the Siddur that we use every morning, the prayer book, guides us to be mindful, conscious, and grateful for our everyday capabilities and blessings that we might otherwise take for granted. That the only, and then, as I mentioned, the daily morning services, Birkot HaShachar, which is the morning blessing, demonstrates the ability of prayer to remind us of our blessings and our obligation to ourselves and the world. And for one example is, praise are you, God, who rules the universe, enabling us to distinguish day from night. And this is a quite striking blessing, because how many of us really wake up in the morning and realize, I could see the sun. I could see that, especially now in Montreal, where it's still dark when you're waking up. And at one point of the day, when you're making your coffee and you're in your kitchen and you see the first glimmer of light that's coming through your kitchen window or wherever you may be, and you're thankful for that. You're mindful that specific moment, and you recognize that you have the capability, or you have the ability of, maybe that some people in the world don't have, the ability of just distinguishing between night and day. It's very simple, it's very obvious, but that's something that we tend to forget. And the prayer book is here to remind us of being grateful of what we have, of what we're able to do, and that might not be everyone's everyone's reality. Let's see another. Let's see another blessing. So, classically, all the blessing have an opening where it says, "Praised are you, Hashem, our God, who rules the universe," and then each one of them has a specific one. So we just gave one example of distinguishing between day and night, and then there's another one, clothing the naked, releasing the bound, raising the downtrodden, creating the heavens and earth, providing for all of our needs, guiding us on our path, strengthening the people of Israel with courage, crowning the people of Israel with glory, restoring vigor to the weary, and removing sleep from my eyes. How about that? How about that? And when we're thinking about being grateful and being conscious, I gave my soul or my body at the end of the night where I was weary and tired, and I got a fresh new one in the morning. That's something to be grateful for. That's something that we tend to forget every morning, how we, after a long day, when you had a hard day, or even if you didn't have a hard day, you just had a long day of work, coming back home, you're taking care of your wife, taking care of your kids, and being so tired where you're just sleeping. And guys, I know that happens a lot to you when you're just falling asleep in the sofa, and then you have to wake up, and you wake up in the morning fresh. When you realize how great that is and how much of a blessing it is that you can wake up in the morning completely charged up and ready for the next day, that is something that one has to be careful. And not only careful, maybe that's not the right word, but being conscious. And this is really what we're talking about. Conscious living. Making room in your life for those small details, and being kind of conscious of that. Before I move forward, while we were just gave an example, I want to quote for you the definition of what it means to be conscious. I might have done that. I should have done that really at the beginning before even giving an example of the prayer book. But I gave you an example, and let's see now how Dr. Helen Langer defines for us what it means to be mindful, and what it means to be to have a conscious living. And so Dr. Langer says that mindfulness means active awareness, sensitivity to process versus outcome, conscious control over our thoughts and behavior, attending to context and trust of our intuition. Dr. Helen Langer continues and says, our minds constantly create patterns. The mind generalizes prototypes from our experiences into patterns that enable us to react appropriately in new situations that have similar problem solving needs. This helps us walk through doorways, skim newspapers, and pay bills. But sometimes we need to turn off our autopilot, especially if the pattern is one that we do not want to continue. Interrupting the patterns that we would like to change by increasing our mindfulness provides us with the opportunity to make a conscious choice instead of continuing to operate by automatic reflexes. So that is the definition of Dr. Ellen Langer of what mindfulness is. We walk through life a lot of the time, and guys and girls, all of you know that we go through life, and a lot of the time we're just on autopilot. When we're driving, when we're eating, even when even those that attend services every morning here, and do tend to try to pray and so forth, and to connect to something that is greater than them. We put on our tefillin and we do all these mitzvot without being conscious of what we're doing. We're almost on autopilot. We do those things without thinking what we're doing. So being mindful is really taking ourselves off the autopilot. Is really focusing on making and doing things consciously before doing them. Doing things that I remember one time I was at the supermarket at IGA, and as I was getting ready to pay, I've taken a tray of sushi that was in the fish section, in the kosher section, and the lady at the register looks at the box and she says, "Oh, what is this?" And I said, "It's sushi." He said, "Oh," she said, I didn't know I didn't know that fish or sushi had to be kosher." And this is, by the way, just in parentheses, this is a non-Jewish teller that knows that there is such a thing of kosher food and so forth. And in her mind, kosher food is maybe meat and so forth. I didn't ask her, but that's what I assumed from her question. And I tell her, well, yeah, some fish also has to be kosher, and I eat kosher even when I eat fish. And she looks at the box and she's inspecting it from top to left before she rings it up, and she tells me, "Wow, you really have to think before you eat." And at the moment, I maybe not give it, I didn't give it so much thought, and I'm thinking to myself, well, and I got in. I'm sorry, and I got into my car and I was thinking about what she said, and she said, "Wow, she's right. I have to think before I eat." That's actually being conscious of. We should all think before we eat, right? That's a little bit what differentiates us from animals. Animal goes straight to its food and it just eats whatever it takes in, and it's happy. We have to think and before we the ingredients. So we look at the ingredients. We're looking at anything. We have to think before we actually. Every human being has to think. Even more so, if you're Jewish, you also have to think about kashrut. You have to think about what's kosher and what's not kosher. What goes into my immune system? Yes, and that is part of living a conscious life, friend. So now that we gave an example, we gave a few examples of the day-to-day blessing, that we that really tries to zoom in on our focus in life of conscious living. And I gave a few examples. I encourage you to next time look at your Siddur, whether you're looking at it in Hebrew, in English, in French, in any language, and to skim through some of the blessings, as long as you understand what you're actually reading, and you'll see that really all those blessings are not from only a religious aspect. There's I tend to see that a lot of people associate, and which is true, it's not wrong, associate the idea of praying and the idea of making a blessing of being religious. But besides that, and that is true, yes, most religious people usually tend to do a lot more blessings than the average person. But one of the goals, and what I'm trying to bring out from these blessings, is one of the goals is, besides the religious aspects of the blessings as we praise God, um, is really this idea of conscious living, on reminding us on how we have to be focused on the details and of the things that are given, because in life, friends, nothing is a given. Some people don't have clothes, as we mentioned that in one of the blessing, that God clothes those that need clothes. Some people don't have eyesight. Some people don't have the capabilities or the abilities to wake up in the morning and to get dressed on their own, or they don't have the abilities of going to the restroom on their own. They can't see or distinguish between night and day because they don't have eyesight. They don't have their eyesight. So, uh, besides the religious aspect of blessings, which we should do as religious as Jews, we need, we want, and we need and we want to bless God, but it's also a blessing to us that that helps us focus on things, and be more mindful of the small details that in everyday lives. Now, I'd like to um, I don't think you continue on this theme um, of prayer, and looking a little bit deeper, and examining our prayer life. So the rabbis in the Talmud debated how a person fulfills the obligation to pray. So how does one fulfill the actual, what is prayer? And not so much what it is in its definition, but what are we trying to accomplish? How do we actually, or how should one prayer? Is the obligation fulfilled through the recitation of fixed words and fixed times, or is the obligation fulfilled when we acknowledge God with a full intention through personal words that come from our heart when we are moved? It's a very valid question and a very valid debate. Am I to come into the sanctuary or come into the synagogue and repeat the words at a certain time, at a certain place, and so forth, without really feeling anything? Or no, it's actually words that have to come from the heart. So clearly, uh, there's a piece of this of this debate that is forced, uh, and I think that the message behind this debate is that both aspects of prayer are necessary and serve different purposes in our lives. Judaism acknowledges that prayer is not an easy practice. Don't get me wrong. For those that know that coming to the synagogue every day and actually being inspired takes a great amount of effort and great amount of self abnegation and focus and concentrating. We always used to say that your greatest ideas come to you when you're praying, because your mind is so somewhere else as you're saying the words, that your mind is floating everywhere. It takes work on the part of the individual. There's a beautiful poem from your word is fire. Um, that says something along the lines, prayer is never repeated. The quality of each day's prayer is unlike that one of any other. This is the inner meaning of the Mishnah's words: one whose prayer is rigid prays without supplication. This can be seen even in the thoughts that distract us from true prayer. They too are different every day, right? So we come every day and we say the same prayer every day, but it's a different experience every day. And even the thoughts that kind of distract us are different every single day. Each day and its prayer, each day and its distractions until Messiah comes. I found that a uh, very, very pertinent to the idea of prayer, of everyday prayer. Now, but so this challenge, uh, it exists, and I and it's something about that we face daily when we pray. We want to be able to express each word of our prayer with full intention. We want to mean what we say. We want to know what we mean, and we want to say what we mean. Every single one of us wants to be inspired when we're praying, and we want to be able to pray this well while using the words of the traditional prayer book. And this is really where the debate is 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 relevant to us, because as I mentioned, yes, one has to say the words that come from the heart, but we want to use those words that are expressed in the prayer book. So we have to kind of, and this is a lot more challenging, because we have to try to find ourselves and this expression of what the prayer is within the text of the Siddur itself. Um, I think um, if we can do this in prayer, then perhaps we will be able to do it in fullness of our life as well. And so, by doing so, and by trying maybe that's, I don't know, maybe for some of you that's the starting point. Maybe for those that are not praying every day, might be not the starting point, because if prayer, for those that pray every day, the starting point could be prayer, and by focusing and making uh, our daily prayers of more being more conscious and mindful of and focusing on what we're trying to accomplish, might lead to living mindfully in other aspects of our lives. And I think that's really a tool. Uh, Back to what I was saying. Um, so praying every day will actually help me being more conscious, being more mindful. Because when I focus and I want I want to feel what I'm saying, and I want to be honest. I want to be sincere. I want to say the words and mean what I say. And that it, and if I try to do that and I try to focus, I might be able to apply to other aspects of my life. Of, of being sincere and really saying what I mean and feeling what I mean. And being sincere, not being sincere with others, and being sincere with myself. So here too, we is another example of this conscious living, um, that the prayer, the daily prayer, could help us being more mindful of our surroundings and the details of our lives. Now, let's. I want to take you somewhere to a great rabbi that I'm always happy to read different things from him and different quotes. You could look him up. It's Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And Rabbi Heschel often began his evening lectures with a simple statement. Ladies and gentlemen, a great miracle just happened. Everybody around the room and the audience is through the audience you could hear gasps and the curiosity is palpable. What great miracle had just occurred? Everybody's asking themselves. And then the rabbi would pause for a second and then say, the sun just set. Now, how many of us could really think or really feel that when the sun sets is actually a miracle? Now, Rabbi Heschel grabbed his audience with a striking example of his theme. The everyday occurrences in God's creation are miraculous. But we, human beings, we see the sun rise and set every day, have become accustomed to the regularity, and therefore we have lost our sense of awe. And I want to just open a parenthesis. It's not so much of a parenthesis, but I want to explain a little bit of what Rabbi Heschel might have meant by that. I know you understand what he means, but I want to find a source for it. And when we look at the word in Hebrew, teva, nature, so there's many ways of understanding this word, and I want to take a minute and explore one of them. Teva is spelled tet bet ayin. The source of the word teva could also mean tovea. It's spelled the same way. It's just there's a O somewhere there that makes it tovea instead of teva. Tovea means to drown. And drowning is what happens every day. Not myself, but the actual miracle that there is in nature that happens every day, and the example that we just gave of the sunset or the sunrise or any other miraculous things that seem to us just like it's natural, is actually tovea. It's concealed. The miraculous thing that is happening every day is drowning. It's concealed. Just like someone is drowning, his face is under the water and you can't see him. The miracle that's happening every day in our life, the miracle that's happening every day in nature is actually drowning. It's concealed from us. And it's not concealed from us because somebody is behind the scenes concealing it, which could also be, which is the creator of all the universe, which is kind of dissimulated and hiding within nature. But it's also our regularity. If you would see if you would see an elephant flying, the first day you would see it, you would be like, "Wow, that's a miracle. That's unbelievable." By the second day, it would still be on. By the third week or a month, and it doesn't have to go for years. After the regularity of the thing, we don't recognize that it's a miracle anymore. And I think that those two words, teva, which is translated usually as nature, and tovea as drowning, coincide with each other. When we look at a great miracle, and we look at when we see sunrise or a sunset, we just say, "Oh, well, it's nature." Well, you're drowning, my friend. We are drowning. We are drowning in our own reality, in our own regularity. the miracle itself is drowning in that nature where it looks to us just like something natural, but it's actually drowning. And with it, we are drowning ourselves. We are drowning in our own regularity, in our own day to day when we don't recognize anymore. And the proof is, I'll give you an example. You ever been hiking? I've been hiking. I've been hiking a few times. I love hiking. And when I get to the mountain peak, I mean, I'm not such a big hiker. I don't get to very high ones. But when I do get to a mountain peak, I'm mesmerized by nature. It's unbelievable. It's awesome, and that awesomeness um, is awesome to me because it's not regularity. It's something new. I just discovered something, a peak, and the view and nature and the trees and the sky and the skyline and the beauty. But if I would do it every day, guess what? It would just become a regularity. So conscious living is actually awakening, and it's actually swimming on top of the water, realizing what is around us, as as not and not drowning in our own regularity, in our own um, in our own day to day lives. So back to for Heschel, awareness of the divine begins with wonder. He called for an attitude of radical amazement towards the world surrounding us. And I quote, to see the world through the eyes of wonder is to see God's presence in everything. It was the biblical prophets who elevated the notion of wonder from surprised reaction to a form of thinking, an attitude that never ceases. This attitude of wonder leads to awe. Awe of the great wonders that are around us. The notion of wonder, or whatever the prophets called surprise reaction, should be the attitude of our lives, our day-to-day lives. And I think what we just learned from Rabbi Heschel is uh, is not only looking into the details of, as we just saw in the different examples of day-to-day prayer or the blessings and so forth, is to not drown in our own realities, to not drown in our own regularities, and to be amazed every time. Um, and that amazement of, or radical amazement, is the it should be our attitude towards everything. It should be our attitude towards life, to be amazed that we have so many great things around us, to be amazement of nature, to be amazed is to live a mindful and conscious life. Conscious living. Finally, I wanna. I can't talk about mindfulness and conscious living without speaking about Shabbat. And I know what everybody's thinking. Shabbat, yeah, Shabbat is a religious thing. Shabbat is even taboo. Shabbat is so many restrictions, and it's for the religious people, like people say it all the time. But I want to try to share with you, um, not the importance of Shabbat, but what you're missing out on Shabbat. Um, and I know that some of you might think that it's so restrictive, and there's so many things going on Shabbat that it's not for you. But Shabbat is another form or another tool that Judaism provides to help us lead a more meaningful, conscious life. And that is Shabbat, my friend. Shabbat is traditionally seen as a precious gift given to the Jewish people, and that's cited many times in many many biblical sources and many rabbinical ones. Um, it is a day set aside to stop all acts of creation and attempts to achieve mastery over our world. And this is something that you could easily find in Genesis, on how mastery, to a certain degree, was given to the humans over the world and over nature and so forth. And on Shabbat is the actual attempt to stop achieving mastery. Let go. Let the flow and the dimension and the reality of Shabbat just take over your life completely. Just let go. Don't try to master or achieve anything on that day. Um, and then let me take you to, so that's a pretty straightforward idea. Mastery. You want to master and you're a master over, no problem. God tells you you can do whatever you want 6 days a week. On the seventh day, just let go. Can you let go? And so on Shabbat, it says we are forbidden from engaging any melacha. What is a melacha? It's so the melacha is defined as a constructive human act initiated on Shabbat, demonstrating supremacy over nature, as I just said. On this day, when we are forbidden from engaging in new construction, we have, so what is Shabbat? We have the opportunity to reflect on what is and on what we have. So instead of inventing things on Shabbat and being occupied with all the material that we have and all of the things that we have around us, Shabbat is really taking away from all of that. Shabbat wants you to focus on not what you could get, which you do the whole week, right? The whole week we're running around, we're going to work, we're going to the bank, we're going to schedule our plan our vacation, do all these things on what we believe we have mastery over, what we want to create in our lives. And they're all good things, don't get me wrong, friends. We have to go to work, we have to plan our vacations, we have to do all these things. That's great. That is part of our life. And we have 6 days a week to do that. But one day of the week, we have to reflect on what we have and what is right now in front of you. All the blessings that are surrounding you, and not on what I could acquire. That you'll have to wait for Sunday. On Shabbat, we have the opportunity to deepen our awareness of what is in our lives, as opposed to producing more. Shabbat opens the possibility of deepening our awareness and relationship with what already exists. In addition to the prohibitions of the day, Shabbat is filled with positive commandments and what we are obligated to do on this day. Many of these obligations can help us block out our everyday distractions in order to lead more mindful and conscious lives. Friends, because that's what we're trying to do here. This is what we're trying to learn about. This is what we want to try to achieve. Conscious living, being mindful. And that focus on Shabbat is precisely for that. All of those restrictions are not because there's some really strict God somewhere up in the heavens just trying to make my life hard and miserable because he doesn't want me to touch this and he doesn't want me to do that and don't turn this on and don't take this. No, absolutely not. This is straight for us, to being conscious of what we have, to focus on what is in the present, what we have in front of us. All those restrictions or whatever malachot that we have that are constructive human act need to cease for our own ability to focus on what we have and being mindful and conscious of our lives, are the details of our lives. That is, friends, the greatest gift of Shabbat. Now, from that, that was from a human standpoint, and what I mean by that is that is the gift that God gave us for our own good, for our own benefits. How many people you know today are trying to disconnect, especially in our days, to disconnect from everything? Disconnect from your phone, disconnect from your computer. Heck, disconnect from this podcast. What are we trying to do? How many people you know today are trying to do that? I'm not going to get to all the problems that all of these things are helping us not to focus. So many distractions, so many billboards, so many TV shows, so many Netflix, so many series to follow, so many things that really help us being distracted and not having conscious living, not living a conscious life, not being mindful. So we need to do all those things, and that's fine. That's good and dandy, like they say. But there's one day of the week for your own good. The gift that God has given us is the ability to disconnect. And what I mean by ability, because every one of us could do it. You just want to have to. You just want to disconnect from everything around you and connect to something that is much greater than you. And that's really maybe the second part. I'm already going into the second part of Shabbat. So, and what I mean by that is that, yes, there's a religious aspect to it, because when we look at the verses in the Torah and Exodus and Deuteronomy about the Shabbat, there's a religious aspect to it. And from a religious standpoint, the Torah tells us, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you are to serve and are to make all of your work. But the seventh day is Sabbath for the eternal your God. For in 6 days the eternal made the heavens and earth, the sea, and all that is in it. And God rested on the seventh day. Therefore, God blessed the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day. I'll stop here. Now, and my understanding of remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, that is exactly the holiness that we're looking for. The mindfulness, the conscious living. Making our lives holy is about focusing and focusing on the things that are in front of us, the blessings that are in front of us, and living a conscious living. What could be more holy than that? And yeah, we have to take care of God also. And finally, the verses in Exodus says, the Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days the Eternal made heaven and earth, and the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed. I would like to conclude with a quote from Rabbi Greenberg from a text about Shabbat, and that really shed lights in a lot of the ideas that we wanted to convey here about Shabbat being a tool for conscious living and mindfulness. And Rabbi Greenberg says as follows: the movement from weekday work to Shabbat rest is a move from acting outward to developing inward. The Shabbat is more than a day of being, it is a day of becoming. Rest is more than leisure from work, it is a state of inner discovery, tranquility, and unfolding. The ability to accept and affirm life in its own right frees me to become more than I am. Through self development and through intensified relationships with others, the Sabbath commandment is not just to stop working, it is actively to achieve a state of menucha, menucha being rest, through self expression, transformation, and renewal. On this day, humans are freed and commanded to explore themselves and their relationships until they attain the fullness of being. The Shabbat is a response to runization by creating a temporal counterculture, an island, a special existence within the stream of time. And becoming holy, the human being shifts from unexamined life to examined life, from instinctual existence to conscious being. Only one who is conscious of every moment can make choices or apply a hierarchy of values in every act of life. The detailed Shabbat ritual, which appears to prescribe everything by rigid rules, is really an assertion of consciousness and one's freedom to imbue every gesture and experience with value. It takes discipline and awareness to make these moves correctly. In this area, as in so many others, freedom grows in the womb of structure. And since every gesture is willed and directional, it is rich in meaning and statement. Every move on Shabbat is part of a dance of holiness. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I hope to see you next time at Rabbi Pinto's podcast. In the meantime, try to remember that God is in the details, and you can find yourself in the details, your real self, your conscious self. And by looking in the detail and living in amazement of the things that are around us and appreciating things that we have, you'll look at the details and you'll find value in everything you do. You'll try and start to live a conscious life and being more mindful of the things around you. In the meantime, God bless, and we'll see you next time.